to you. The first is that I've been in Parliament now for 14 years. Every single one of those years has been spent in opposition. I've seen the poll tax be introduced, I've seen the undermining of the health service, I've seen the growth of social division in Britain, I've seen the wipeout of a third of our manufacturing base, I've seen 14 years in which the Conservatives have been governing this country, 18 years in all. I have to say to you, I make no apology at all for making sure that the Labour Party reaches out and builds new support. Because if we can't build that new support, we can't do anything for any of those people that have supported us over all those years. And I represent a constituency in the northeast of England, which, if you like, is what people would call a traditional Labour constituency. They know perfectly well that if I can't get out there and reach and build new support, I can't do anything for those that I represent. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is this. We are offering those who have been traditional supporters of the Labour Party a very great deal in this election. For example, we are the only political party putting forward a proper programme for youth and long-term unemployment. The windfall tax on the privatised utilities, the excess profits there, to fund that £3 billion programme over the lifetime of the Parliament to get young people off benefit and into work. Or you would look at our education proposals to reduce class sizes for 5-, 6- or 7-year-olds, or the proposals we have in the National Health Service, or on crime, or for pensions. These are all things that are going to bring benefit, not just to traditional supporters, but to those around the country. I'll just say one other thing to you as well, though. You see, I think it's to play the Conservative game, to say the Labour Party simply represents those people that are poor and disadvantaged or unemployed, and the Conservatives represent the rest. That's not the true divide in British politics. The true divide is between a Labour Party today that represents the decent, hard-working majority of people in this country and a Conservative Party that's there for the privileged few. Now, that is why I created New Labour. I did it, it was difficult, it was painful often, but it was absolutely necessary. Because if you come into politics to get something done, and for 14 years I've been a sayer, not a doer, then you have to have a political party capable of it.
Karen Hayward.
Karen, if I can just say to you, I mean, just take the example of that windfall tax there to fund the unemployment programme for young people. Supposing we were able to get 250,000 young people off benefit and into work over the lifetime of the Parliament, which is our commitment, I mean, that would be a dramatic indication of how much we were trying to heal the wounds in society, the fractures in our society, and bring the country further together. Supposing we were able to extend educational opportunity to those that don't have it at the moment, and reduce class sizes for all the 5-, 6- and 7-year-olds in the country to 30 or under. Now, that would be doing something. That's a big difference from the Conservatives. All the way through there are differences, but, you know, I suppose the differences fall into a different category from the differences, say, of 30, 40 years ago. And this is why today's Labour Party has changed, because I want the Labour Party, for example, to be a party that's committed to enterprise and to business. And I'm proud of the fact, again, that there are business people today who find themselves perfectly happy and at home in the Labour Party. But I think the vast majority of them, and I hope you, understand that it's possible to build a society where there's ambition and aspiration, but some sense of compassion and decency and obligation for others, and that's all we're trying to do.
Okay.
Impression you're not 100% in support of us. But I want to say this to you, you know. I mean, first of all, you obviously haven't been watching television, indeed the BBC, quite as much as you should have. Otherwise, you'd have seen Margaret Beckett and John Prescott there many, many times. But I simply say this to you. I believe the threat and the danger to this country is not a new Labour government. It's another 5 years of a Conservative government. That is the threat to the people of this country, and I think they appreciate that and know it very well. Because that is the danger to our health service, to our pensions, to our schools, to our standard of living. And I think, with all due respect to you, that if you actually look at what has happened in Britain and the type of government we've had over this next few years, these last few years, then those very things the Conservatives have done over this period of time are precisely the reasons why many people in this country say enough is enough and it's time they went.
Let's have a question.
The very reason why we changed the Labour Party was so that we could try and take this country forward. Now, the essential elements of the Conservative trade union legislation of the 1980s will stay. There's no going back to the days of secondary pickets, secondary action, you know, all the rest of it, strikes without ballots. those provisions will remain in place. But I really say to you that I think now we can start to move this country forward. The issue in British politics today should not be the old conflicts between bosses and workers. It should be how we get the investment in our people at the workforce, how we get partnership at the enterprise between employees and employers. There's no going back to the 1970s, but one of the reasons why, to go back to the question that was put to me there a few moments ago, one of the reasons why that isn't going to switch the clock back. We're not going to do that. You have my assurance on that. You know, we are going to take this country forward, and the things that we will concentrate upon is putting right what went wrong in the 1980s, not correcting those things that are working.
Can you give the assurance, was the question, on behalf of union leaders, that they won't bring the country back to the struggle?
But I may say to you as well, I think the vast majority of trade unionists in this country realise we've got to go forward, not backwards as well.
Okay, the man in the centre there with the striped blue and red tie on.
Mr. Blair,
yes.
You're only using you as a Trojan horse. You've got 101 members of the Tribune group who will be sitting behind you after the 1st of May if you get elected. And they haven't got the same agenda as you have.
Well, you know, this is the old Tory propaganda, but I have to say it's wearing a little bit thin, you know.
It's true.
It's wearing, well, I know, but it is wearing a little bit thin. I mean, you know, people keep saying to me, oh, yes, well, Tony Blair believes that, but do the Labour Party believe that? First of all, I was elected leader of the Labour Party by the largest popular mandate of any leader of any political party. Number two, when we rewrote our party constitution to put a commitment to enterprise and the private sector aside our commitment to social justice and decent public services, we put it to our membership 90% in support. Then last year, we did another thing, a first. We put our draft manifesto programme to our party members in a ballot. Now, frankly, sir, I can't imagine the Conservative Party putting their manifesto to a ballot of their members, to a ballot of their members of Parliament, or even, frankly, to a ballot of their cabinet. Now, what people want of me is to say to them what I want to change and what I want to leave in place. Now, you know, I could go back over. Margaret Thatcher was a member of Ted Heath's government when Ted Heath was doing this, that, and the next. There's no point. Let's just work out what's right and what's wrong. What's wrong with the present Conservative government is, for example, the education system, is, for example, what they're doing to the National Health Service, is a divided society, is what they've done to the industrial base, is what's happening to skills and technology within Britain. Now, you say we haven't put forward proposals on those things. We have.
But can we stick to trade unions? Because I'm sure
No, it puts power in the hands of union members. There's no going back to the closed shop. There's no going back to people being forced into trade unions, but people should have the right in a democratic society to join a trade union if they wish to. But the trade unions will be operating within the laws and the constraints that will forbid all those things that marked the past. And I do say to people, I mean, I know that the Conservatives will run these scares throughout the general election campaign, but I think that, you know, it is time to move this country's political in the English language, and it's called no. And if people make demands upon
K-N-O-W, N-O.
Well, there's N-O as well,
I
if
see.
you don't mind.
Like Ken.
And, you know, if people make demands upon me that I think are wrong, then they'll be refused. Now, I don't think anyone could look at the way that I've led the Labour Party in the last 3 years and think that I'm pushover for the STUC or whatever else it is.
Okay, the man
just made it clear. I mean, this is what David and I went through, sort of, you know, 10 rounds with the other evening.
So it's no longer undemocratic and designed
no,
to
I've said to you that what I think is important is, you know, and frankly, rather than reading out the old Tory Central Office brief, exercise a bit of imagination yourself. In the end, let's say you were a member of Ted Heath's government. You could go back to Mr. Major and say, well, Mr. Major, you used to support Scottish devolution. There's no point. Let's move this political debate on and stand on the... I've already just said to you, that will remain in place. Ballots before strikes. All the rest of it is there. Instead, what people will have is proper minimum standards at the workplace. And rather than going back over what was said 14 years ago, just focus your mind on what could happen in the next 5 years.